the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, had planted a bomb 6 or 7 feet under my bed in the cupboard of the room underneath me. So I was kind of sitting on it.
Harvey Thomas was sound asleep when that bomb went off.
I was in the top floor of the hotel, so I went right up through the roof of the hotel, down 3 floors, and my body caught on the steel girder it was sticking out just below the 5th floor.
And that may not be the most amazing part of Harvey's story.
I am with you. I am with you always. You don't have to be afraid. I'll be comfort through the pain.
Harvey Thomas is our guest on this episode of GPS, God, People, Stories. I'm Jim Kirkland.
And I'm Phil Fleischman. Harvey Thomas was serving as British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's press secretary when that deadly bombing happened. He's going to tell us more about all of that. And you'll also hear from Billy Graham with a word about the Northern Ireland conflict.
And I don't care whether you're Catholic or Protestant or who you are, what you are. God loves you.
If you'd like to know more about God's love for you, visit us at this website, findpeacewithgod.net. That's findpeacewithgod.net.
GPS.
God.
People. Stories.
April 8th marks the 4th anniversary of the death of Harvey Thomas's good friend, Margaret Thatcher. But we begin Harvey's story not with his time with the British Prime Minister, but with a ministry, namely the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association.
Had the opportunity of working in the Billy Graham Manchester Crusade in 1961, organizing sound landline relays. And I ended up working as a crusade director with the Billy Graham team in 100-odd countries for 15 years. So I was directing crusades in Australia and Germany and, you name it, everywhere. And then taking part in crusades here, training counselors in Tokyo, all over the world.
Within a year or so of leaving the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, Harvey was returning to Europe after having been away from home for a while. His flight took him through the West African nation of Senegal.
This was in 1977. And I got out at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was about the only person getting off the Lufthansa flight. No electricity in the airport. And 2 passport officials who were very tall, very big. And they had a good laugh when they took my passport and shined a torch on it. And I said, "What's so funny?" And they said, "Well, it says Great Britain on here. Britain isn't great anymore." So I thought, oh dear, I haven't been living there for a while. So I went back to Britain.
The political party running the government when Harvey returned was the Labour Party. And Harvey did not like the way they were doing things.
And so I went to the Conservative headquarters and said, "Look, if you give me a small honorarium, what can I do for the next 6 months or so and do a bit of work?" And they said, "Well, what do you do?" So I showed them a picture of the Billy Graham Wembley Stadium rally with 103,000 people and everything in there. And I said, well, basically that and everything connected to it in public relations.
So the Conservative Party asked Harvey what role he'd like to play in Margaret Thatcher's upcoming run for Prime Minister, her first run for the office.
And I said, well, who actually sets up and runs the Leaders Tour and arranges all press facilities, stage facilities, lighting, audiovisual, sound, crowd control, everything? To which the reply was, in 1978 this was, oh, there's nearly always someone who's got a microphone.
Harvey had his work cut out for him, and he'd use a lot of what he learned working with Billy Graham to bring more organization and structure to Margaret Thatcher's campaign. There are changes that are still felt in British politics today.
I set up Margaret Thatcher's 1979 election tour, and we arranged 5 big rallies, and then we did it all properly as professional setup, and then we had all these drop-in by helicopter scheduled meetings everywhere, all the photo ops, moving the press around, all the logistics of everything. And it was terribly straightforward. I mean, after Billy Graham Crusade, it was very straightforward.
Yeah. Margaret Thatcher won that 1979 election, and she remained the British Prime Minister until 1990. Harvey Thomas served as her press secretary the entire time.
I worked with her on speech writing, all the productions, did 3 election tours for her, and was with her right till the time she resigned.
Kingdoms hang in the balance as walls break down into stones.
During her 11 years in office, Margaret Thatcher steered Great Britain through a lot of political turmoil. One of the biggest issues facing the British government was Northern Ireland.
You see, Catholics in Northern Ireland wanted the region to be free from British rule, but Protestants didn't. While efforts were made to reach a political solution, there were factions on both sides that resorted to violence, and one of them was the Irish Republican Army.
The IRA was fighting for independence for Northern Ireland, but it carried out terrorist attacks in other parts of Great Britain, too.
Well, in 1984, we had a party conference in a town called Brighton, which is in the southern coast of the United Kingdom, about 50 miles south of London. And as the Director of Communications, I was the director of the conference. And so Mrs. T and I had started to rehearse her speech on the Thursday night. The big speech was on Friday when the Prime Minister made the speech. And so on the Thursday night, we'd been rehearsing from 7 o'clock to about 11 o'clock, something like that. And then 11 o'clock, she said, I've got to go to all the balls, the dances, for the last night of the conference. Harvey, you go and get some sleep, and I'll probably call you again about 2:30 a.m., and we maybe do some final work on the speech, because these rehearsals were rewriting the last bits, getting the tone right, getting the punctuation right, getting the pauses right, getting everything right.
Harvey did go back to his hotel room and fall asleep, but it wasn't a phone call from Margaret Thatcher that woke him up.
The IRA, the Irish Republican Army, had planted a bomb 6 or 7 feet under my bed in the cupboard of the room underneath me. So I was kind of sitting on it. I was in the top floor of the hotel, so I went right up through the roof of the hotel, down 3 floors, and my body caught on a steel girder it was sticking out just below the 5th floor, and the fireman told me that 10 tons of rubble fell on top of me and buried me. So all this happened at 5 to 3 in the morning.
I am with you. I am with you always. You don't have to be afraid. I'll be comfort through the pain.
One of the most amazing parts of Harvey's story is that he wasn't seriously injured. He didn't even have a broken bone. The blast, though, did kill 5 people and wounded about 30 others. Margaret Thatcher and her husband narrowly escaped injury. Their bathroom was badly damaged, but the rest of their suite untouched.
Harvey's grateful that his wife Marlies wasn't with him. She was back home 9 months pregnant with their first child. Harvey remembers what he was thinking as he was catapulted out of the building and as he fell onto that steel girder.
So I remember saying to the Lord, if I've got any sins left unconfessed, do you mind taking them as read? Because I haven't got a lot of time right now to go into detail. And then I crashed down, and all this rubble came on top of me. Now, I had no doubt at all I was going to die. Absolutely none whatsoever. And that was fine, because I'd given my heart to Christ when I was a young boy. I knew where I was going. I knew I was going to be with the Lord in that split second. That's fine. What was worrying me was Marlies, who was 9 and a bit months pregnant, and no husband for Marlies and no daddy for the baby. And that was what I was praying for.
It took rescuers about 2 hours to dig Harvey out of the rubble. And being the consummate PR man, Harvey took reporters' questions when he emerged from the debris.
The BBC man was doing an interview. But of course, my eyes had been molded shut under wet rubble like this for 3 or 4 hours. All I could see was this bright light shining straight in my face. I didn't realize there were 27 other television cameras standing behind this guy, all filming. So he asked me all the questions, and he said, what do you think about the terrorists who put the bomb there? I said, well, if we'd been a little more effective with our proclamation of the gospel and getting Jesus Christ known, there wouldn't be so many terrorists.
The terrorist who planted the bomb that almost killed Harvey was a man named Patrick McGee. Harvey didn't think much about Patrick until 14 years later, when Harvey was teaching at a church reconciliation conference. The subject of his session was forgiveness.
I said to this audience, they were quite a big group there, about 1,500 in the church. And so I